All right, let's get into it. Yeah, sometimes OBS is super reliable and then sometimes it's not. I'm like, why? All right, so official welcome. Wow. So this clinic is on routine choreography basics, so I'm not going to get into like super detailed information of like this is how you transition from this type of movement or this type of sequence to that type of movement or sequence. We're just really thinking about the basics today. Um, but as always, you can throw your questions, your thoughts into the chat, and I will do my best to keep an eye on it. There will be time for questions at the end, but you can also put your questions in the chat throughout, and if it makes sense with the content we're looking at the moment, we can discuss at that time. Um, and the clinic will be recorded. I'm recording it on two computers, so one of them should work. And I'll send out a ping with the Felix's Rider rule once the recording is uploaded and available on YouTube. All right, so we're just going to quickly look at the agenda today. So just kind of like an outline of what we're going to discuss. So we're going to start with parameters. So when you're kind of looking at a routine that you would like to choreograph or a competition you would like to choreograph for, what are the routine requirements, theme, number of riders, available divisions, and then the differences between a competitive routine or a showcase routine. We'll also look at inspiration, so like tips to get your creative gears turning, documentation, commanding notes, writer notes, practice takes, diagrams, etc. Then we'll get into the actual choreography, so brainstorming, structure, transitions, dynamism, and then balancing symmetry and asymmetry. And then finally, we'll just take a look at feedback. So um, how can you incorporate judge feedback for the next routine, along with feedback from your writers, so the people who run the routine, and also how can you look at your own growth over time and sort of give yourself feedback. And then, when applicable, I will pull examples from the last routine I choreographed, which was for Hoedown. All right, let's get into it. So, first bit here is parameters. So kind of like what do you need to work with for this specific competition? So, Um, the most important factors you want to consider is the timeline and the number of riders. So here is the requirements for the Star Summit, which is happening right now. Um, so you want to look at when does the routine need to be submitted? Like what is the final day where you can submit the routine? Uh, do you have enough time to choreograph, teach, and film a routine in the allotted time? So just think about your own schedule. Like say you're super busy with work or school or other responsibilities. Do you have enough time to do all that? If you're a first time choreographer, this might be a little hard to gauge, but as you gain more experience, you can kind of know, yes, I would have enough time for all that. You can consider how many practices a week would be required as you're working on this routine. So, for example, if you normally practice maybe like twice a week, but for this routine you would require 4 practices, would this potentially lead to burnout for yourself and or your writers down the line? Again, this can be hard to gauge if you're just starting choreograph, but for example, if you know currently that it's hard for your writers to focus if you practice more than twice a week, maybe leading up to a potential routine on the horizon, you can try to include a third practice here and there to kind of like get them to work on their stamina of like staying focused for longer periods of time or more often per week, I guess. The next thing is number of riders. So if the routine calls for 6 riders, but you have exactly 6 riders who show up regularly to practice, might be better to wait for a routine that calls for less riders. Because a thing that you will often run into is maybe you have a lot of people who are pumped at the beginning and want to ride, but their motivation will peter off over time. And then when you need to film the final takes at the end, you don't have enough people. You don't have enough mains there. Maybe you don't have enough alts, so you can't actually film your final takes. So a good general rule of thumb is to have at least half the number of alts for your total amount of mains. So for example, if the routine calls for 10 riders, like minimum 10, you want to have at least 5 alternates. So if some of your main riders are missing, the alternates can pop in and run the spots. The next thing is the theme. Do you find the theme inspiring For yourself personally, because I think it can be hard if the theme doesn't like spark some interest in you, you might not be super motivated to work on it. Um, so maybe even if the theme itself, like how it's written on the requirements, is not super inspiring, maybe you can tie it into um, like another source of inspo that kind of gets your creative juices flowing. And then the next thing you want to look at is divisions. So if you're just starting to choreograph, I highly recommend you start with novice, work your way up to standard, then competitive. This will give you more space to grow because the junior divisions require less riders and shorter routines of the competitive division. So, um, because if you hop right into competitive, you'll be with the teams and clubs that have been competing for a long time and have very seasoned choreographers, and it can be a bit disheartening if you put in all this hard work, but you're likely not going to place very well because you're going up against people who are very experienced with choreographing and teaching routines. So I recommend you start with novice, work your way up to standard, then competitive. And then lastly, you want to think about your routine types. So a competitive routine that has placings is generally hosted by a community server like SSD. There's also some smaller ones like there's the Dressage Network, there's Dressage Teaching, there's Foundation of Stars and Dreamers. I'm trying to think, there's a couple small ones, and then sometimes two clubs and teams will host little small competitions. These are almost always judged, and then there's a scorecard and commentary provided after the judging period is completed. So you do get feedback from the people who are hosting the competition, and then this can help you improve for your next routine. Another option is a showcase. So this is a routine that you work on with your members outside of a set competition, and this can be a great start to choreographing since there is no set deadline and no pressure for placings or being judged. This can also be a good way for your members to be introduced to the routine structure without the pressure of a community competitive environment. Although if you do go the showcase route, I do still recommend that you give yourself a deadline to work towards too, so that the routine does not drag on endlessly. Because that can, oh, and then Looney's mentioning some others here. Art of Dressage, Journey to Dressage, and the Dressage University. Yeah, so there's lots of smaller little competition servers. Um, if you do go with the showcase route, still set yourself a deadline because if the routine drags on for too long, your riders can also get bored because you've spent, I don't know, let's say like 6 months working on the same routine. They're gonna get tired of doing the same sequences over and over and over again. And then if you would like some kind of feedback when you do create a showcase routine once it's done, you can send it to some friends of yours, or maybe there are quite a few of the dressage community servers have like a channel where you can send routines in, and you can say like, hey, can you guys give me your feedback? Like, can you tell me your top 1 to 3 moments from the routine and maybe 1 to 3 points where I could improve for next time. Oh, yeah, good job, guys, setting recommendations to Kathu. Basically, any application where you can draw, you can make diagrams in, or Rideful you can use to make animated diagrams, which is a web app. Alrighty. So that is kind of looking at the requirements. So we're going to look at inspiration now. All right. So with inspiration, let's talk about the theme a little bit more. So if, for example, we got a little Rideful, your mileage may vary. I personally don't like it because I don't have the patience for it. But if you have the patience to learn how it works, and you like to see the little horses moving along the track, go for it. I personally do not like it, but I don't have the patience for it. So I would say try it. There's lots of good tutorials online, like some people have already mentioned, and then if you find it helpful, go for it. Um, so for inspiration, more about the theme. Is there any current media that you know of that would fit well into the theme for the competition? So for example, with Hoedown Showdown, it was Western and like drill based. So when my club was thinking about potential like sources of inspo, we looked at like classic spaghetti westerns like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and games like the Oregon Trail and Colt Express. And then we had a poll with like all the things that I thought of that could potentially be good inspiration, and then the members suggested some as well. And we ultimately settled on Red Dead Redemption 2. Um, Another example is with the current Star Summit competition. Some possible sources of inspiration could be movies like Interstellar or Project Hail Mary. the Apollo 11 or Artemis 2 missions, or games like Stellaris or Outer Worlds. And then you could also ask your members if they have any good ideas. Sometimes they like think of something that you like totally forgot about, or maybe they know a really interesting movie or TV show or game that you've never heard of, but that would work really well with the theme of the competition. Um, what I would recommend here is that if you can, watch the movie or TV show, play the game, read the book, listen to the soundtrack, because the more that you can immerse yourself like in the source of inspiration, the more ideas it can kind of bring up for you. So I've played Red Dead a lot. I've played the story and I've played online mode a lot. So I know the game quite well. But then I also listened to the soundtrack on repeat while I was choreographing for Hoedown Showdown. And then this also helped me select the 8 songs that were in the final cut of the routine that we submitted. But you do not need to go with like a set piece of media with your routine. You can go with a general theme. So like an example is the feeling of awe that washes over you when you see the night sky for the first time unimpeded by light pollution. So like if you've only ever lived in an urban area where there's lots of lights at night, and then you go out into the country where there are no artificial lights for like kilometers around, and you look up at the night sky and you see the stars for the first time. You could base a routine around that. The trick here is that you need to find music that goes well with your chosen theme. So it might be a little bit trickier because you don't have like the official soundtrack that goes with the movie, the TV show, the game. So you just have to hunt for the music a bit more. So that's inspiration. Alrighty, let's keep going. So next thing is documentation. All right. So what I would highly recommend if you are choreographing for the first time or you're relatively new to choreographing is do what you can to keep yourself organized. It will make things less stressful for you, uh, and just make things easier in the long run. So one of the things that I do is I have commanding notes. So I have here on the side, this is an example of my commanding notes for Hoedown Showdown. I just do this in Google Docs, but you can have like, for example, a storage server in Discord, or maybe it's just your notes app on your phone, just somewhere to throw your commanding notes in. What I like to do is I color code the notes based on the colors in the diagrams. So I had 6 writers in Hoedown Showdown, and on the diagrams they had their own unique color. And then in the Google Doc, I use that color as well, so it's easier for me to find um, who I'm talking about when I'm writing my commanding notes. And then I make them super detailed because, say for example, there's a day where I can't command or lead the practice last minute. Theoretically, another instructor in the club should be able to read my commanding notes and command in my place without me having to explain too much. Or say, for example, you have a main writer that can't show up last minute and you need to get their alt caught up. Really thorough commanding notes can help with that as well, because sometimes you make little touch-ups in a practice and it's 2 weeks later and you need to teach this alternate, everything so far, and you can't quite remember that small detail. So I'd highly recommend thorough commanding notes. And then you can't see in the bottom here, but I had something about like next practice, try this little tweak. Because like usually when you're done practice, you have some ideas of what you could try next time. So it's like, oh, do we want to maybe try this type of saddle cross, or maybe this gait would work more nicely instead. So you can throw those little notes in there for yourself to remind yourself for next time. Let's try this little change. The other thing is writer notes. So in my club, what we do is we have a forum in the closed server, and each main writer has their own forum post to keep track of their notes for their spot, and each alt writer also has their own forum post. So here is an example of Sunny taking notes for Hoedown Showdown. Um, and the goal for the writers is when they're taking notes is that, for example, if Sunny couldn't be there and somebody is having to alternate for Sunny the first time, they should be able to read Sunny's notes and hop in, maybe write it once or twice on their own, and then be good to go without too many needing to ask too many questions from the commander of what needs to happen. And then what's great is the alternates have their own forum post. They write their notes when they're writing for a main writer. Usually they'll just write the section that they learned during that practice. And then they'll ping the main writer. So for example, if Sunny was not there on Tuesday and Mishi wrote Sunny's spot, Mishi would write in her little forum post, "Hi Sunny, I wrote your spot today. Here are my notes. Let me know if you have any questions." And then Sunny will go take a look, ask Mishi any questions, and then add whatever notes Mishi took, format them the way that she likes, and put them into her forum post as the main writer. So writer notes are also great. They're also super helpful because it helps them memorize if they write it down instead of just passively listening and just trying to remember without the help of notes. And then they can also ask clarifying questions. I find that that helps me a lot when I'm writing is if as I'm writing the notes. So for example here, Sunny had for as front hooves are over the line, Jenny is one quad behind and then gate up on the center line. So say I hadn't mentioned this gate up on the center line to Sunny, as she's writing her notes, she could kind of go, oh, it's hard for me to find alignment with Jenny on the peak of the diamond cross. So do I ask Felix about this? So as your writers are writing notes, because they're actively thinking about the material as they're writing it, they're more likely to ask clarifying questions because they're spending more time thinking about what they're doing, if that makes sense, than just passively listening to your instructions and then writing the spot of the routine. So highly recommend to get your writers into the habit of taking notes. This is also great if last minute one of your main writers, I don't know, their dad had to have surgery and now they're taking care of their father for the next 2 weeks, so they cannot write in the routine. Their great great aunt just popped up for a visit and wants to take them to Disneyland. They can't write in the routine. Um, I don't know, something random comes up and your main writer goes poof. If they took really good notes up to that point, if an alternate then has to step in and become the main writer, it makes things so much nicer. So highly recommend if you can get your writers to take notes, have them take notes. Okay, the next thing is practice takes. So this is just at the end of practice, um, do a little recording from the top down of how the routine looks up until now. Um, and then this helps you track progress over time. So you can see like how did the routine change over time from the beginning to the end. And then also if some of your writers miss that practice, they can go and look at the practice take and match it up to what their alternate writer wrote for notes, for example. And then also if an alt writes for a main, they can take a point of view video of themselves in the arena and send that. That can also be really, really helpful as well. Okay, the last little thing here is diagrams, and I do have a slide for this. So here is my chaos. So this is an example of the diagram that I did for the diamond cross that we did in Hoedown Showdown. So this is all 6 writers at once. But what I would do when there's too much visual information like this is I would have just, for example, um, the pink and the red arrows together. They would have a diagram just by themselves. Um, and then the green and the purple would have a diagram just by themselves, for example. So then they still have the gist of what they need to be doing, but there isn't all these lines here. Then what I also really like to do is I'll put the arena letters on because that can help them identify where they need to be, and then the arena lines and the meter lines. But you do not need to do that. That's up to you, what your preference is, or what you think is most helpful for your writers. And then here's an example of another member in my club, Wilma. She recently choreographed a routine for the Hushed Hunt, which was hosted by a smaller competition server dressage teaching, and she had 3 writers to work with. So she has a similar method of using different colored lines for each writer, although she uses a program on her iPad called iArtbook. And look at these beautiful, straight, perfect lines. Wow, so clean. And then my mess over here. But I mean, your diagrams don't need to be perfect. As long as they are legible to your writers to help them with understanding choreography, you're good to go. So if you do start off with something beautiful here like Wilma, or you're making them in Rideful and they look beautiful and clean and professional, but then later on you find that you don't have enough time to produce the same quality of diagrams that you did previously, that is okay. That is okay. You can then move to something a bit more quick and dirty like this. As long as your writers can understand what you're trying to communicate with the diagram, you are good. Don't try to hold yourself up to like perfection if it demotivates you from choreographing, if that makes sense. All right, so those are diagrams. Okay, let's get into the choreography. So exciting. Wow. What everybody has been waiting for. Okay, before we get into this, do we have any questions up until now? Before we get into the meat of the clinic. All right, I think we're Gucci. So, choreography itself. Yippee. All right. So the first thing I would suggest is as even before a competition is announced, maybe you know that, oh, SSD, I've looked at their schedule, the next competition is coming out next month. How can you prepare yourself even before the information is released? So one example is you can do a routine study night. So this is where you choose like around 4 to 6 routines by other clubs and teams, maybe that you admire, or you know the instructor who choreographed the routine, or you saw that they placed well in the last competition. So you pick 4 to 6 and then watch them with your members. And as you're watching the routine, have everybody kind of like note down what parts of these routines stood out to you. And then maybe you can kind of try to think as a choreographer, how would I replicate a similar effect um, in a routine that I want to choreograph? Like, how could I try to get something that looks similar? Or you can even try to recreate it exactly. It's kind of like a good exercise of translating what you see in a routine created by somebody else, and how would you communicate that to your writers? How would you diagram it? Um, that sort of thing. And that can kind of help you um, get out of like your box, think outside the box. But what I would say here is that if you do this, just be careful that you're not recreating a part of routine one to one is something that you make. I mean, if you have a pinwheel in your routine, pinwheels are quite well known in the community. So if you have a pinwheel in your routine, somebody else has a pinwheel in their routine, that's fine. But just make sure that, for example, you're not entering the pinwheel in the same way and exiting the pinwheel in the same way as like a routine that you watched. So just be careful there. Like use it for sources of inspiration, but don't copy if that makes sense. So as you're watching their routines with your members, what parts really stood out to you, and you kind of look like, wow, that looks so cool, or I've never seen that before, or that is really unique, or it worked with the music really well. And then also too, you can kind of look like what parts of the routines that we watched could be better changed so that they flow more nicely, or maybe that they suit the beats of the music better, or maybe this part wasn't really on theme. What could be something that could be changed so that it suits the theme better? So kind of put like your art critic hat on, I guess, or your movie critic hat on, like how could this be improved? And it's kind of like a good exercise for your dressage brain, for your members' dressage brains. I highly recommend. And it's fun too, kind of just watching a bunch of routines together. The next thing is the dressage brain itself. So the more that you choreograph, the more that you just start to think about choreography all the time. Maybe that's a bit of hyperbole, but like for example, pretty much anything can be inspiration for dressage. So like if you're watching a group of birds flying, like when geese fly in an arrow formation, when smaller birds, there's this phenomenon called murmuration, which is when a flock of birds, like many small birds, flies and then the shape kind of twists and turns. Cars merging on off or the highway after you blow out a candle and the smoke is kind of like curling and wisping. Any of that could be inspiration for a sequence or a movement in your routine. So what I would recommend here is keep a little notebook to jot down your ideas, the notes app in your phone, or maybe you have like a storage server on Discord, or maybe like there's like a section in your closed server or the staff server for your club or team where you can like throw ideas for competition. So for example, uh, for Classic Cup last year, so at the end of 2025, the owner of my club, Toilet, she choreographed an arcane themed routine for that, and she got inspired by the three body problem. So we found like some gifs that scientists made to show how the three body problem works, and she used that as inspiration for a sequence in the routine. So anything, really anything in the real world or in any sort of media that exists out there, paintings, movies, books, TV shows, um, board games, I don't know. Anything can be inspiration. So just like leave your brain wide open, your dressage brain wide open to all possible avenues of inspiration. And then the last little thing here for brainstorming is can you find collaborators? So if you're brand new to choreographing, maybe it's your first routine or your first few routines, is there someone that can be a mentor to you? Um, so they can guide you through the steps of creating commanding routine, or maybe they don't have time for that, but they are available if you have questions when you get stuck. You can like send them a quick DM, and be like, hey, like here's the diagram or here's a video of what we're currently working on. I'm really stuck here. do you have some suggestions of how I could like smoothly transition here, or maybe like how I could better fit this section to the music, that sort of thing. Is there a mentor that you can kind of tap into? So for myself, for example, when I first joined Crystal Pirates, I had choreographed a couple routines previously for like a more casual dressage club I was in. But Toilet, the owner, had a lot of experience as a choreographer, and she kind of took me under her wing and like walked me through like more in detail. How do you do the thing? These are the things you want to look out for. How do you manage these sorts of situations, et cetera, et cetera. So if you can find a mentor, that can be really great. Another option is to have a co-choreographer. So this is if you have a friend who maybe is not in your club or team, um, or another member in your club or team who is very passionate about dressage. It can be super helpful to bounce your ideas off another person, and you can keep each other motivated throughout the process. So, for example, you can hop into the arena together and test stuff out. You can work on diagrams together. You can send each other sources of inspiration. What I would say here is just be clear upfront what you expect the time commitment to be if you are looking for a co-choreographer. So, like for example, like, hey, I would like to meet twice a week for an hour and a half to brainstorm choreography or test choreography together. But just be upfront what you expect from the person you'd like to work with. Um, and then the last thing is you can also ask your writers for their ideas while you're in practice. So when testing or fine tuning, ask for their observations because you're looking from the top down, right? So your perspective is different from them riding the routine in the arena. So how did that section feel to ride? Do they have any ideas for adding in some extra flair or different ways to connect two sequences together? You can also ask them to name each part of the routine. So, for example, in past routines with Crystal Pirates, we've had set names like Chocolate Chip Muffin Set or Rotisserie Chicken Set or Jim Bob the Fish Philosopher Set, like just silly names that kind of just make the process like more fun. You can have them do that. All right, that is brainstorming. So this is like what you can kind of do ahead of time, even before uh, the competition is announced with all the requirements and stuff. Yeah, and Zigzag is saying brainstorm meetings with members that want to take part. Yeah, that's great too. Get your writers in with you, have them go take all your brain cells together and make a mighty brain, a mighty dressage brain to come up with potential ideas for the routine. Yeah, that's great. Because also too, like sometimes you get stuck when you're just working by yourself. And then if you have other people kind of there with you, you can kind of like help each other get over obstacles. Kai is saying made a move that we called Dad. That is so funny. That's hilarious. Okay, let's get into structure. So, um, as you're putting together the choreo, the opening and the ending of the routine are the first and last impressions that the judges and whoever is watching will be left with. So, can you begin the routine in an interesting way? So, for example, from a unique part of the arena, you're not starting around the middle. Maybe you're starting from the corners, or maybe you're starting from like a weird part in the left upper quadrant, or I don't know. Or maybe your writers come out in like unique ways out of global. Can you open the routine in an interesting way? Maybe you sync the entrance in an interesting manner with parts of the music. Maybe the opening really showcases the theme from the start and really kind of shows like this is the theme, this is what we're going for. The opening kind of does that for you. Um, and then same with the ending. Can your writers exit in an interesting way? Does the end of the routine tie up everything nicely in a way that makes sense with the theme or the music? So is there like catharsis at the end, for example? So I do have a little snippet from the Hoedown Showdown routine that we did here. Just gonna make sure again that Discord. Oh, it's showing the video properly. Oh, this is so exciting. Okay, so we're just gonna watch the ending here. So what we did for the ending sequence is we were in like a rotary pinwheel situation, and four of the riders exited on like the gunshot sound from the Red Dead Redemption 2 intro. And then the last two riders in the middle here are supposed to represent John and Arthur, so they do not disappear with the gunshots, but these other guys do. So let's just watch this. Sunny's gonna disappear here. Kai, and then Uma, and then yeah. So how how can you like so we base the routine around Red Dead Redemption. There's that iconic shotgun sound as you're loading into the game, and then also the way that we built the routine is that we followed the Vanderlyn gang as they moved from each of the camps through the American West. Um, and at the end, they're being chased by the law. There's a big shootout, so just all made sense with the rest of the routine. Um, I just use CapCut to cut different audios together. It's easy once you get the hang of it. Um, and then it lets you make the music more custom because you put snippets together as makes sense. So I took 8 songs from Red Dead Redemption and I made a supercut at the end, synced with the sequences, and then I just added the gunshots in as the riders were disappearing. So I was able to really, oh, this is the final take we selected. That's where Sunny disappears. Oh, there's the gunshot. That's where Magpie disappears. Oh, there's the gunshot, right? So that's a way you could kind of get around if like the music is not really syncing up with what your riders are doing, you can edit the music to the routine. Yeah, it can make things easier for you for sure. So that's an example of like an ending. I've also seen some other clubs um say like they choreograph to like a well-known movie that has a logo that is very um defined. They'll end in a shape that looks like the logo. Um or maybe there's like a really like big battle sequence at the end and then they communicate that through the end sequence. So yeah, you can make it really interesting. Okay. Looney asked, do you prefer to create the routine around the music or do the music around the routine? So what I usually do is once we've selected our like inspiration source, so for example, we did Red Dead Redemption here, I listen to the soundtrack literally on repeat. Like my aim was to have it in my Spotify remix or whatever, like my top listened tracks at the end of the year. I was listening to that thing over and over and over and over. Um, and then that helped me kind of think about, okay, this part of the routine, if I think about how it fits in with the game, but the theme that I'm going for, does it make sense? Like this song is more slow, does it suit this movement? This song is more quick, does it fit this movement? This section is supposed to represent like a very like eerie kind of spooky moment in the game. Does it make sense with this movement? Um, so it's not that I create the routine around the music or the music around the routine. They kind of work together, if that makes sense. They play off each other. Uh, Laya, I always get stuck in the middle. Um, my writers are doing the same thing because I'm scared that it will look messy. Later on, we're going to talk about how to introduce asymmetry, so not always being symmetrical mirrored. I mean, just a couple slides down. I'm pointing, you can't see. We're going to talk about asymmetry in a second. Yeah, Bunny is saying I tend to create pretty asymmetrical routines, just getting writers to places no matter what. Savvy, do you find the music before you start making the routine? No. So and this is not how you have to do it. I would say the more you choreograph, the more you kind of find your style or your workflow. I will listen to the soundtrack or music that fits like the theme, and that kind of like jogs ideas for potential choreography. But I will usually kind of like something will sound really good to me and I will choreograph to it and then I think about what is the next thing that I want to convey in the routine. Do I want to continue with this current piece of music, or can I switch it up and kind of like splice in another song that also fits with the theme in the routine, and then continue working from there? So it's like they're synergistic. They work together. They like play off each other back and forth. But what you can do though is like say you found a really good mix of like for example one of the other instructors in my club recently did a showcase with one of our trial batches that was How to Train Your Dragon themed, and she found a really cute mix of I think 2 or 3 How to Train Your Dragon songs on YouTube, and she choreographed to that track. Like she didn't change it at all. She choreographed to it. So she was really paying attention to like how the music changed. Where was like the big like um, changes in volume or speed, and she choreographed to it specifically. So I would say like try both see if there's a style that you prefer, or even does it change from routine to routine, competition to competition? What makes the most sense? Uh, Zigzag is suggesting you split the arena in four squares, three of them in one square, another five in another part of the arena. Yeah, so that can kind of force you to think in terms of asymmetry because you have odd numbers of riders in each section. It's not exactly four and four. So, like Zig's example, three and five, you then have to think asymmetrically. You can't, it's harder to make a symmetrical movement if you have an odd number of riders. Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Um, Bunny says choreographed specific beats. Yeah, and also too, like, mm, yeah, if you get comfortable with like splicing different tracks together or you find a really good remix, then you can kind of like massage or manipulate the music so that it makes sense for your routine. That's what I like to do, but depends. Depends on what you're comfortable with or what you find most interesting when you're choreographing. Because also too, like you want to keep in mind, you don't want to for yourself to become burnout, because your energy also translates to your rider. So if you get tired, if you become unmotivated, your riders will feel it, and then they will become tired and unmotivated as well. So how can you keep the whole process interesting for yourself? Kind of a challenge, but. Charlie asks, what would you do if the music ends up not matching the routine? It's maybe offbeat. You can't really do anything with it because it would mess the audio up. That's a good question. So I would say, how can you then change the choreography? If you really want to stick with the music that you found, how can you change the choreography? Actually, we're going to talk about this a little bit more later, but I'll discuss it a little bit now. You can change the gates you're using. Maybe your transitions are slightly different. Um, Maybe you even change that whole section completely so that it matches the music better. Um, Sometimes too, it's like just a question of calling it differently. Uh, like for example, with Hoedown Showdown. Oh, I'll show you guys in a second. But there was a section where I was using goes to call a part of the move, but then their timing was slightly off. So then we instead made it point based, and then it went correctly with the music. So sometimes it's like, okay, can I instead instruct my riders to do this section point based? So for example, when my front hooves hit this arena line, I do this, where instead of waiting for you to call a go. And sometimes then, because they're doing their thing over there, they have a point based marker, you can instead call more goes for another group that need more goes, if that makes sense. So like, how can you change up your commanding as well? Sometimes that can help. Kappa, I always get stuck in a deep dive on YouTube or SoundCloud for audios. Those are great places. Sometimes Spotify, I mean, lately its recommendation algorithm has not been so hot, but sometimes you can like do like the radio feature on Spotify. I think Apple Music has a similar one, and it suggests songs similar to the one that you're currently looking at. Can I speak a little slower? I'm so sorry, Nadia. I do tend to speak fast. I will try. You can also, when you're brainstorming with your members, you can say, hey, I would like to do, or we have selected a routine themed around this movie, for example. Do you guys know any songs from the soundtrack that you find work really well? Or have you seen edits on TikTok or Instagram of this movie and you think they would work well with this routine? Um, my DJ on Spotify is in its 2000s white girl era. That's so funny. But yes, I would say too, because sometimes you'll get kind of stuck in like your own the type of music that you like to listen to. So it can be nice to ask your members of like maybe you have one member who really loves metal, or one member who really loves like folk, or one member who really loves EDM, and they come up with some suggestions for music that you could use that you would have never considered because they listen to different genres than you. That makes sense. All right. Yeah, Jax has a good idea here. You can kind of have a playlist going of some potential routine songs that you could use in the future, or like inspiration for mixes that you could make potentially. Kind of keep a little playlist for that. That's a good idea. Okay, I think now we're discussing amazing music. Okay, let's keep going. Looney asked, due to screen delay, do you call the go on the music beat and edit it to match afterwards, or do you go the hard route and call the go a bit before, but so it matches lines up? Um, so what I like to do is when we're practicing the routine, I play the music for the riders at the same time. So I call the ghosts to the music, and you do have to call them ahead of time because of screen delay and audio delay. However, with a new screen delay update, uh, screen delay is reduced. So you kind of have to rejig that now, like reformat how you think about when to call goes. But the more that you practice, because generally, like when you're doing routine practices, you're calling the same bit over and over and over within the hour or the hour and a half. So you'll kind of just get a feel of like, for example, say like Sunny is in this routine that I'm choreographing. When Sunny's nose hits the quarter line, I call this go and it matches up with the music, if that makes sense. But if after your final take you need to move the music around a little, you can do that. I mean, nobody's gonna come and arrest you. You can move the music around if it makes more sense for the final take that you got. Vale creates a collab playlist in which everyone can add songs. That's a great idea as well. Anna as well. Spotify playlist, everyone puts music in. Um, Hannah is asking, due to the new screen delay, would you say it's way easier? I have not yet worked on a routine combined with this new screen delay, so I cannot answer that question. Um, I would say I wouldn't say it's easier or harder, it's just different. Um, you'll just have to get used to how it it works now. Uh, so like maybe prior, say you would call a go for like a rider that's walking, you would call as their nose is about to reach an arena line or meter line. Maybe now because screen delay is less, you would call as their nose is over. So you'll just find markers for yourself. Um, and also too, what's interesting is currently it seems like the screen delay is a little bit different for each rider sometimes, depending on how bad their lag or their Wi-Fi is. And even the horses are different. So if you're riding a Andalusian versus a Dutch versus a Belgian versus a Dartmoor pony, the delay is even slightly different. Um, so hopefully SSO smooths that out over time. But you'll just kind of like find for yourself markers of like, I know when this rider is at this spot in the arena, I call this go and it matches up fairly well with the music. Or like what Toilet does, the owner of my club, is she has those clear sticky notes that you use for annotating textbooks. She'll actually put those on her monitor over the section of the arena where she needs to call a go. So for example, she's like, okay, I have my red sticky note here. I know that when Magpie's saddle is under that sticky note, I call this go for this section of the routine. You can do that too if you find that helpful. And then also, yeah, like Zig is saying, there's audio delay. So you'll also kind of see like what is your own unique audio delay. Usually it's about like half a second to a second. Let's say one of your riders lives in an area where their Wi-Fi is really poor. Maybe they're like in a rural area and there's no fiber or broadband. Then you might ask them to, you might need to know, oh, if I'm calling a go for this rider, I need to call it a little bit earlier than I normally would. Or you ask them to go on pre, for example. So you'll kind of see as you work more with your riders what sort of information they need from you as a commander. If that makes sense. Okay. Do we have any other further comments before we? Yeah, I feel like the screen delay update, everybody was like, "Oh my God, what is going on?" Panic. All right. So the next little bit here is you consider your opening, ending. Oh, bro, I cannot talk. Your opening and your ending. How can you make them unique, interesting, and really communicate the theme or the overall meaning of your routine in a way that leaves a strong impression with the judges and whoever is watching. The next part is standout sequences. So, for example, in Hoedown Showdown, we had to include three drill moves. One of them had to be a pinwheel, and then I selected the other two as a diamond cross and a null void. So I knew I had those three big standout drill moves that I had to use in the routine. And then I tried to think about how where do I want to place them in the routine in a way that makes sense with the story I'm trying to tell. sometimes it's easier to just start with those big kind of standout sequences and then work on the transitions later. All right, thank you, Snow. Thank you for being here. Um, and then as you think of these big standout sequences, what makes them show-stopping? Are you employing dressage techniques in a non-standard fashion, in like a way that you maybe have not seen often or have not seen before in other routines? Are you playing with different gaits, with different shapes, maybe with unique ways of the riders moving together or the way that the goes are being called? It's like non-standard, for example. So sometimes it can be easier to think of like those big moments first and then work on the transitions later. If that your creative flow works that way, you can do that. You do not have to work linearly from the beginning and then all the way to the end. You can kind of jump around a bit and put the transitions in later. The next thing is use of the arena. So what I recommend here is as you diagram your routine, keep track of where your riders are in the arena. So I saw some of you guys earlier sending like I guess an overall mix of all the layers of all your diagrams together. And you can kind of see how far did we travel through the arena overall. Did we reach out to all four walls? Have we crossed every arena line and meter line? You can also keep track of what gates you have used so far. So have you used the backup, the walk, the trot, the canter, the extended canter, the fast gallop, and the faster gallop? Have you used all the possible gates in the routine? Have you used a variety of shapes? So have you used curved shapes versus sharp shapes? Um, have you used different techniques like riding in a tight rein versus combs versus slants versus circles? So as you can kind of keep track, maybe in your commanding notes, or maybe you have a second separate little Google Doc or notes thing, or in your or your storage server on Discord, and then you can kind of go, okay, I've already done circle moves here. How can I now work in some other stuff that is different so we're not constantly repeating the same things? Um, and then also what I do there too is I track how long each sequence takes. So I'll say, okay, this sequence is about 20 seconds. So now I want to move into something else. That was about 15 seconds. This next one is slightly longer, maybe 25. But you can kind of also keep an eye of like how long are each of your sequences? If one of them is a lot longer than the other, is there a reason for that? Is because you're wanting to really emphasize that section? Or maybe if it's a little bit too long, you trim it so that it's not dragging on for too long, because that can be boring sometimes if say you have a pinwheel going on for a minute and a half. It's like, okay, what are we doing next? Like, let's go. Let's keep on moving. Paya's asking, do you think it's a good idea to use the special gates of a horse in a competition? Um, I mean, if it makes sense. Some of the special gates do look quite different from the top down. Some of them don't. So I would say just test it, whatever horse your clever team uses. Does this special gate look different enough from the top down that it would make sense to use? And also, is it easy for your riders to transition between the special gate and out of it? Because sometimes too you can get stuck in the special gate, which is annoying. So I would just think about these things. Looney is showing an example gates and colors. Yep, that can also be really helpful for your riders to understand if the diagram is in this color, I work in this gate. Yep, that's a great idea. Uh, and then the next little bit for structure is working with the music. So what I think about here is when you've looked at like a choreographed like dance or like like a musical performance, like a theater performance, or even like a music video. How do the dancers move when the music is slow versus fast? And then how do they emphasize certain parts of the song through the movements that they're doing? So here you can think about if this section of the music is slow, do I use a slower gate here? If this section of the music is fast, do I use a faster gate here? You can also, if you're using magic courses like the flash when you change coats from the magic coat to the normal coat, that can be kind of fun. The use of ignore global or like really quick gate changes. Like say for example, your riders are working in the backup and you have them switch to an extended canter as the tempo of the music increases dramatically. That can look really interesting. So how can you use your gates or the movements of your riders to emphasize moments in the music and vice versa? How can you use moments in the music to emphasize what your riders are doing in the arena? Um, if there are sections where the choreography is not working with the music, like we talked about a bit earlier, can you change your gates to be slower or faster? Can you make that section of the routine shorter or longer? Or can you even just reorganize the order in which the sequences appear so that they make more sense with the music? Sometimes too, you can just look at your transitions and edit them, like change them up a bit so that the flow is nicer. And then we also talked about just editing the music. So you've been fighting with the choreography and the music for the last week and a half. You can just edit the music if you're comfortable doing so. Um, all right. So next thing we're gonna look at is transitions. Transitions and dynamism. So how to keep transitions interesting. Uh, so this can be tricky to do. But it can also be a good chance to showcase a good dressage theory with clean gaps in alignment. So maybe you need to you were working together in the top left corner of the routine, but the next sequence is happening down in the bottom right. So how do you get over there? Maybe you do like an interesting kind of like slant movement, and then you're showing really good slant alignment. Maybe your riders are riding some of them are riding super fast, and they get over to that section, and maybe you have some other riders do a movement in the middle, like maybe some revolves or like some interesting shapes as everybody else moves to the corner, or maybe you ignore global. So it's like, how can you keep the transition interesting without it being another big wow show-stopping like movement? How do you get them to travel? So I would say don't be afraid to make your transitions like not as complicated, but kind of use them as an opportunity to show really good understanding of gaps in alignment. And I know the new screen delay update has kind of messed that up, but as you get used to how screen delay functions now, how can you show really good canter comb alignment, for example, or really good use of saddle crosses, that sort of thing. And I would just say here too, like you want to avoid defaulting to returning to single file. Uh, that's not super interesting unless they're getting into single file or into a waterfall and quickly out, maybe back in, quickly out. So they're not trotting single file or for a long amount of time. I would use that sparingly. Can you just use quicker gates as well? So the faster you move, the less time it takes to transition, the less boring it is for whoever is watching. And I do have an example here for Hoedown Showdown. All right, here it is. So for this section of the routine, we opened with the diamond cross, and then from the diamond cross, I wanted the six rider to then come again together to make a two-spoke pinwheel. So instead of them just kind of like turning and finding the pinwheel shape, we had four riders in pairs in a canter tight rein, and then two riders were riding a modified half eight. And then once they all completed their movements, we entered into the pinwheel. So here's that. So, and then this diamond cross was also modified because the diamond cross usually employs just two lines of riders, and here we have four. Well, they're all kind of riding their own individual line, and then they're aligning at the top of the peaks. Okay, so in the left here, these two pairs get into a canter tight rein, and then this is where this is called with a go, but you'll see that their crescent keyhole, I could not call it with a go properly, so they just do a point base. A, and then these guys were riding their modified half eights here, and then all together they're getting to the midline to set up for the two-spoke pinwheel. So yeah, so that's that section. So instead of having them, so like for example, when we finish the diamond cross, back up. So like about here is kind of like the end point of the diamond cross. Instead of like just having the riders, like for example, Sunny here could have just continued straight. Magpie could have just like kind of turned. Hayden the same could have just turned. Pablo could have just turned. Star could have just turned, and Wheel could have just turned. Instead of just kind of immediately trying to get right to that two-spoke pinwheel, it's like, what can I put in between that is different from the shape of the diamond cross. So the diamond cross was a symmetrical shape. How can I now do something that is quite different from that shape, employs different techniques, and then that shape is also different from the pinwheel that we're going into next. So it's like, how can you kind of switch up your techniques with like each sequence of the routine, so that it's just more interesting for the judges to look at and the people who watch the routine later as well. Um, yeah, so that's an example there. All right, I see a couple people typing. Zig says, honestly, I think that everything that is something, wow, I never seen that before, is what judges look for. Yes. So what I like to think about is, for example, if you're learning something new from the SSD dictionary or another Clever Teams dictionary, you kind of learn like the foundation of it, and then how can you modify it in a way to make it more visually interesting or odd, uh, so that when somebody watches it, they kind of go, "Huh, I haven't seen that before," or "That's a different way to do that." So like another part of this with the pinwheel that we did here. uh, Okay, so generally pinwheels will be set up with riders on the 5 meter. We don't have 5 meter riders in this pinwheel. And instead of aligning to the smallest circle, the riders are instead aligned to the fastest, the biggest circle. So a standard two-spoke pinwheel would have riders on the 5. We eliminated that. So technically it's more difficult when you don't have a rider on the smallest circle. And also they are not aligning to our 10-meter riders here, Pablo and Hayden. They're instead aligning to Wilma and Magpie, the faster riders. And Wilma is also keeping alignment across to Magpie. So it's like, how can you also have to keep in mind the level of the writing level of your members. So how can you throw more challenging ideas at them, and can they execute them, or can you teach them the level of complexity that is required for the sequence in the time that you have to create the routine? Looney says, I find transitioning between big shapes difficult without it just looking like filler. Currently working from start to finish is what works best for me, but I love to be more organized with the big shapes first. Um, Honestly, choreographing, like most creative hobbies, it just takes time. The more you do them, the better you get, and the more that your brain kind of just starts to think about dressage all the time. So when I first started choreographing, I would do a lot of like, oh, I want my riders to move to this area now. They're gonna ride single file, or they're just gonna move in a waterfall, or like the transitions were not super interesting. But now that I've had more chances to do more routines and also to like engage in like dressage philosophy, which is where Toilet and Sunny and I, so as the three uh, leaders and the owner of the club, we like just talk in depth about why dressage is the way it is. And also with the instructors in the club. And with our riders as well, sometimes we just have like dressage philosophy, like all rank practices. We just talk in depth, like, why are we doing dressage this way? How does it translate to other parts of dressage? Um, so like the more time that you spend thinking about choreography, the more that you can kind of just uh, come up with more unique or creative ways to transition, if that makes sense. So like don't feel bad if it's not coming to you right now. With practice it comes. And also too, like we talked about earlier, if you can do like those routine study nights and kind of look at how other clubs and teams do it, that can also kind of inspire you, because like maybe you're working on your current routine and you don't quite remember what club or team you watched, but you're like, oh, I remember they did this kind of interesting transition and it went a bit something like this, and you take a bit of inspiration for that, your current routine. So, but yeah, don't feel bad if it's not amazing when you're first starting out, because nobody is. Nobody is. It just comes with time, the skill. Okay, Charlie is asking, this might be a super off-topic question. I think it's topical. How would you go about not confusing and overwhelming the riders with goes and different groups doing different moves? Um, I would say in regular practices, get them used to different riders doing different things on different goes. So for example, if you do moves like thread, where your ones or your odds have to pay attention to the first go, and your twos or your evens have to pay attention to the second go. You can then even get into tertiary, so 1, 2, 3, quaternary 1, 2, 3, 4 labels. So your ones go on the first go, your twos on the second, your threes on the third, and your fours on the fourth. Or you can also, in practice, put together mini movements or sequences to kind of get them used to the idea of, right, when we're doing this in the arena, I need to really pay attention to this go. So like say, for example, you're calling a movement called rotisserie chicken set, and you have these two riders need to go on the first go, and then these two riders need to go on the second go, and then these two riders need to go on the third go. So for example, in their notes of their routine, they could write, say for example, I'm part of the group of the third pair. I would write my notes, ignore first and second go, not for me. And then on third go, I do this. What can also be helpful is try not to have too many goes in each movement or sequence, like max 3 or 4, because the more goes that you have, the more difficult it is to keep track of which go is for you as a rider. But what you can do then, like say for example, back here in Hoedown, Showdown, the ending sequence that we did where they disappeared on the gunshots, what I would do is I would call the go with their name since there was 4 and it was for one person. So like here I would say Sunny set, pre, go, she would jump and disappear. Magpie set, pre, go, they would jump and they would disappear. So that can also be helpful. So limiting the amount of goes for each movement or sequence so that they know like, oh, when Charlie says lily pad set, I go on the second go. Or this movement or sequence has a lot more goes, I just listen for my name. And I hear like Kelly set, that's my go. It's my name, I go. So you can kind of play with that. Do you reduce the amount of goes for the movement or sequence so that it's easier for your riders to keep track? Or if you do need to use a lot of goes in one sequence, can you call their names so that they can just listen for their name and go on that go? So Zig is saying, when I create a routine, I do it in this way. So move number 1, 2, 3, etc. And then I think of when I want them to do the move, and then I think of how do I get them to move from point A to point B. And if it's too plain, I make them go faster or add in a little curl, make them ride on a straight line. Yep, those are all good ways to kind of spice up your transitions so that they're visually more interesting. Yeah, and then Zig and Looney are also saying you can, instead of just calling like Jim Bob set, pre, go, and go, and go, and go. You can say like Jim Bob set, first go, second go, third go. Yeah, that's also a good way to do it too. You can kind of like add in more information as you're commanding so that they're not just kind of thinking, okay, I think they already said 2 goes. I think this is the third go, and that's my go. Yeah, if you can give them more information while you're commanding, that can definitely be helpful. Alrighty. And then the last little bit here is just talking a bit more about balancing symmetry and asymmetry. So symmetry is quite pleasing to the eye. So I would say don't avoid it completely. It can be nice if you have like flashes of symmetry and asymmetry and you kind of like play them off each other. Because say you had a completely symmetrical routine or a completely asymmetrical routine, that probably would not be as interesting as if you mix the two. Um, so I just got out of here, but I have another example from the Hoedown Showdown routine. Okay, so here we're coming out of that pinwheel from earlier, and this was probably the most boring transition in this routine. They're just in a canter cone, but we do another little symmetrical movement here in the corners. So these 2 groups of 3 are symmetrical across. And then from here, I was like, I've done 2 symmetrical things in a row. We did a pinwheel, and now we did like mini box pinwheel situations at the corners. I want to do something else. So here we move into an asymmetrical moment, which is where we're setting up for a null void. So these 3 riders in this bottom right corner need to create a circle for these 3 riders to run through. And then I wanted these guys to come back through and go through the circle a second time. So they're wasting time basically here. So that these guys can get set up again. So now they're in a rotary here, the 3 layers. These guys go back through. And then now they're setting up for a rotary. So it's like, how can you, if you're like, okay, I've done a bit of symmetry so far for the last like 30-ish seconds, can I now throw in some asymmetry? So you have that contrast, because that is also interesting to look at. All right, yay. And I would say too, like, don't be afraid to like create mirroring moments, because what could be nice is, say like at the beginning routine, maybe you use like triangles or diamonds or squares or circles, and then later on in the routine you do like a callback to that and you have those shapes again. That could be nice because it's uh, humans like patterns. So if you can throw them in here and there, like you do a little bit of repetition, that could be nice, but just try to balance it with other moments that are not heavy on symmetry or mirroring. Have those little asymmetrical moments as like contrast. Like think of it like um, if you're eating a ham sandwich, it's delicious. But if you put a bit of mustard on, wow, it tastes even better. So like, how can you throw that bit of mustard into your routine with asymmetrical moments or like maybe interesting transitions to kind of like elevate maybe your very pleasing to the eye symmetrical moments or moments where you mirror certain sections of the routine. Okay, let's get into the last section, which is feedback. Yay! Okay, so I would say uh, really give yourself space for feedback because each time that you receive feedback, whether it's from the judges, whether it's from your writers, whether it's you're reflecting on yourself, it's an opportunity for growth and to become better and to learn from your mistakes. That's how we learn. We learn from our mistakes. Nobody's perfect. So read the feedback thoroughly when you get it from the judges. And what we try to do at Crystal Pirates is we try to note down at least 3 things that the judges thought you did really well, and then 3 things that you could improve on for the next routine. So here is an example of some of the feedback that we got from the judges for Hoedown Showdown. So they said that the sequences flowed together quite well. We used all of the gates, so backup, walk, trot, canter, extended canter, fast gallop, and faster gallop. We used all the possible gates. Did we use faster gallop? We did. We did use it. So we used all the gates that you could use, and that we used most of the arena. We didn't touch every single arena line or meter line, but we used the majority. The pinwheels were a highlight. One judge said it was like a continuous wow effect that we had the pinwheel near the start. We had the 2 little box pinwheels in the corners, and then we had that rotary pinwheel at the end. And then the outro was creative, left a strong final impression. And then ways to improve next time. So to work on alignment and spacing for a cleaner, more polished look. And I agree, there were some parts in the pinwheels where the riders were not fully aligned to each other. There were some moments where we had death, where the riders were trampling each other. And then also too, the rotary pinwheel at the end before the gunshot ending sequence, the judges were not sure what it was supposed to be. Some thought it was meant to be a beehive, which is another drill move. So it's like, how can we, if we try to use a rotary pinwheel in a future routine, how can we make it cleaner so it's more obvious what it's supposed to be? And then one judge said that they enjoyed our moves that were around X, but they would like to see more sequences or movements away from X that use most or all of the riders and that are collected and dramatic. So maybe it's like, maybe we do like a pinwheel instead of around X, maybe it's around another point in the arena, or maybe we're riding shapes, there's groups of riders riding shapes that maybe all connect together, but they're not on X. So I'll keep those in mind for the next routine I choreograph. How can I incorporate the judges' feedback to make the next routine better? Um, and then I think too, it's good to share the scorecard and the judges' feedback with your riders once you receive it. And you can say like, hey guys, here's the feedback. Here's what I noticed. Like this is what stood out to me from what the judges' comments or the judges' commentary. What do you guys think? Like what did you guys notice? Because again, as a choreographer, you're thinking about the routine in a different way from your riders. You're looking at the top down, you're thinking about the nitty gritty dressage philosophy, why things work the way they do, whereas your riders are thinking about How do I ride with my teammates or the other riders? How do I write my own notes so they make sense to me? How can I help myself learn, that sort of thing? They're thinking about the routine in a different way from you, so they will probably have different takeaways from the judges' feedback. So if you're comfortable doing so, I highly recommend that you share the feedback you receive with your riders because they often can have some good comments and insights from that feedback. And then following up from that, it can be good to have a feedback form. So we have one for Crystal Pirates anytime we do a competitive routine or a showcase routine. We just ask them like, hey, if you guys have a couple minutes, can you fill this out? It's anonymous, but they do have an option at the end to put their nickname or SSO name if they're comfortable with a choreographer reaching out to them with additional questions if they have them. Um, but this then generally what we ask here is what did you enjoy most about the routine that we just finished, and then what could we improve to make things better for our next routine. And then you can also have a club meeting after a routine is finished with all the people who wrote the routine, and then they can speak up in call and give you feedback, or they can type it in the media chat, or maybe they're like, oh, I really enjoyed this club meeting, but I would rather give my feedback through the form, and maybe they do that after the meeting. Um, and then so I'll just give you guys some examples of what some of the members of Crystal Pirates left for me as feedback after we finished the Hoedown Showdown routine. So one of them said the fast-paced choreo was fun. I really enjoyed the theme and the music. So I can keep that in mind in the future. This person really enjoyed quick choreo. So how can think about how can I balance moments of quick choreo with slower choreo to keep things interesting for my writers. Another member said, I think we spent a lot of time on the first half of the routine. Honestly, I would get quite bored of practices because we would just do those same sequences and not add on. So I can think about, okay, in the future, how can I communicate the information about the choreography in a more smooth and efficient way so that we're not spending so much time on one movement or sequence. I mean, sometimes you do just get bogged down and you kind of have to slog through that difficult section. It can be a bit painful, but sometimes that happens. So like some ways you can do this is you can have things for your writers to do while they're waiting for somebody else to be taught. For example, like sometimes you have to teach them one-on-one. So maybe it's like, oh, do you have them play a game together with a Discord activity? Or maybe you use one of those websites where you can like make a puzzle and you put like Betty the Yeti on there or like a cute photo from your last club hangout and they work on the puzzle together. So they have something to occupy their time while you're teaching other people. Or maybe it's like maybe I need to spend more time on my diagrams, or maybe I can work on like how I explain things, or maybe I can record point of view videos of each spot that they can watch before practice, so we spend less time teaching during practice. And then another member said, I love the choreo, and I felt like we were challenged and things were hard, but not too hard. So that's good feedback for me. It's like, okay, I struck a good balance with this routine. How can I continue moving that forward? Making it challenging, but not too challenging so that they're like, oh my God, I'm drowning here. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. Um, and then final little bit of feedback is one of the members said when we were getting towards the end of the routine and we were like workshopping and fine tuning sections, it felt like backtracking because we had been writing the routine one way and then the week off or before recording, we were making small changes. So this kind of like pairs with the second feedback I got of like we spent too much time on the first half. This person said, oh, I didn't like that we backtracked at the end and kind of fixed things from early in the routine. So it's like those two kind of like, how do you balance those two? Like, how do you keep a good pace throughout so that they don't get bored? But also, like, do you want to try and fine tune as well throughout so that at the end you're not backtracking and trying to fix things? Because that also could be frustrating for your riders if they got used to writing the routine a certain way, and then close to the end where you're getting ready to film, you're like, okay, let's go back and like fix these small bits here and there. Um, yeah, so that was some feedback I received for Hoedown Showdown. And then I'll just do this little bit of self-reflection, and then I'll look at the comments in the chat. Uh, so I would say if you're just getting started with choreographing or you're thinking about getting started, the best thing you can do is to just jump in and make a routine. Your first routine will not be perfect out the gate. You will grow and improve over time as you strengthen those choreography muscles and your dressage brain develops and you just start thinking about dressage 24/7. You eat, sleep, dream dressage. So like an analogy I have here, it's like when you first learn how to knit or crochet, you'll start with like the beginner patterns, and then as you gain more skill and experience, you can then tackle more complex projects. And then what could be fun here is if you go back and look at older routines that you've choreographed and with your commanding notes and see how much you've grown in terms of putting together more creative and challenging routines. So you can kind of see your growth over time, which is nice. So Kappa has a question about recording. You're getting close to the deadline and you notice that there's a few minor mistakes. How do you know whether to carry on with the routine and get that recording or halt where everyone is and restart? Is it personal preference? Um, so I would say it kind of depends on as a choreographer. Some people like to like, oh, we had a mistake within the first 5 seconds, we reset. And you keep going until you get like as much of a perfect take as you can in one go. Um, what I like to do personally is I let them continue riding unless there's something really bad, like we totally got out of whack, then I would reset because sometimes like say they made some minor mistakes at the start, but the second half of the routine is super clean and looks really good, that could potentially be a good final take. So I think it depends on how your riders are doing that day while you're trying to record. If they're making a lot of like big mistakes at the start, it might be good to kind of reset or maybe kind of talk about like why are we struggling in this section. But sometimes it's just kind of nice to just let them go through and take a bunch of takes where they just ride the whole thing. Because sometimes there's small mistakes here and there, but overall it looks nice. And then what you can do is you can like select like say your top 3 to 5. You go through them with a fine tooth comb of like you note down like, oh, there's death here, or alignment was not that great here, but oh, this sequence looked really nice. We did that perfectly. And then you can pick the final take yourself or with the help of your staff members, or you can have your members vote on the take that they like best. So it kind of depends on like how your riders are doing. Like if they're overall they're doing a good job, but there's small mistakes here or there, might be good to just let them go through the whole routine and you just kind of see which riders were overall which takes were overall the best. Or you can try to be like more picky and have them reset. If even a small mistake is made, have them reset. That can be frustrating too though if you're a rider of like, oh, like I just want to go through the whole thing and we're being reset. It kind of depends on your group. You'll see. Looney the puzzle game. If you just Google like online puzzle, custom puzzle game, it should come up and you can like put your own image that you want in there and it creates a puzzle for you. You can select how many pieces there are and stuff. Yeah, so Vale has a good point here. If there's a major mistake in the first 30 seconds, they would restart. Small mistakes towards the end, we could usually overlook and save as a backup. You aim for the best and mistake-free recording. Yeah. And then also too, Vale has a good point. As you get recordings, if you have the time, you can watch them back with your writers and kind of point out like, hey, here, Star, I see that you were slightly out of alignment here, so just make sure you're really looking for that canter alignment in this section. Um, Wilma, you were a little late on this go, so just make sure that as you're coming out of this movement, you're really paying attention to when this go is called, so that you go on time. So yeah, that can definitely be helpful. You kind of like watch the takes back like a football coach or a hockey coach or whatever, and you work together on kind of refining each take. All right, I think that is everything I had planned for this clinic. So if you guys have any further questions or comments, feel free to throw them in the chat. How exciting. I think OBS has been behaving itself. Yay! Yeah, I agree, Vale. It does feel like being a coach of a sports team. I coached soccer before I started doing star stable dressage, and sometimes I just have flashbacks to soccer coaching, and there are some parallels for sure. Um, but yes, hopefully you guys enjoyed the clinic. There are some tidbits that were interesting or helpful to you, or maybe if you're a super seasoned choreographer, you're like, yes, I do all these things and more already, but it's nice to have them Co-signed by somebody else. Rosie asked, how long does it take for you to make a routine? So generally when there's a competitive routine that has a deadline, like you have to submit the routine by this date, it I generally work up until a week before the deadline is due, and then that last week is getting final takes. So say we have 8 weeks to make a routine, 7 weeks is actually doing the choreo and learning the choreo, and then that eighth week is getting final takes and editing the submission. Um, the actual choreographing time, uh, I would say each sequence, it depends. Uh, as you get more practiced, it does take less time. I would say like 30 to 45 minutes per each sequence. So each like movement. So like the diamond cross, for example, in that Hoedown showdown routine, thought about that for about 30-ish minutes. The teaching of it though took like a couple practices, I think. But sometimes like the writers, the pirates mentioned their feedback for me, we got bogged down. So that one section where we were transitioning between the diamond cross to the pinwheel, I could not figure out the go timing for those crescent keyholes. So we spent a lot of time testing that, and that got annoying for them. My bad. We eventually just changed it to be point based. So sometimes it's not the choreography that takes a lot of time, it's the fine tuning, the workshopping, the figuring out what makes the most sense for your riders. Charlie says, thank you to everyone in chat. You're also helpful. I agree. Everybody's comments in the clinic chats are always so good. They're so good. They're excellent. Rosie is asking, do you find it difficult to introduce the memorizing part of the routine? What do you do when students are finding it hard to remember? Okay, so let's backtrack a bit to notes, documentation. Okay, so this is why I highly encourage that your writers take notes. Because when they take notes, you remember things a lot better if you write them down. And if you have them do it in Discord like this, like say in your closed server, you have a special form, or you have a category, and then each member has a channel, for example, to write their notes in, or a shared Google Doc, you can also check that they're taking notes, and it's a second way for you to make sure that they're understanding the content. So I highly encourage that you require or ask your writer to take notes because it helps with their memorization so much, and also it eases the communication between your main writers and your alt writers. Uh, if even with this, with taking notes, they're having trouble memorizing and remembering, uh, it could be something else. Maybe they're coming to practice tired. Maybe you need to remind them to have a snack, have some water, throw their phone across the room, put their Discord on do not disturb. Like limit distractions as much as possible. They should be coming to practice if they can, rested, fed, and hydrated. Maybe too, like your riders are really high energy. So maybe at the start of practice, you give them time to yap. Like maybe the first 10 minutes they can just talk really amongst themselves. And then when that end of that 10 minutes is over, you go, all right, guys, let's lock in. We're gonna start working on the choreo. Also too, at the start of each practice, you can have them do a few like run throughs of what you've learned so far. So do like 2 or 3 times from the start of the routine to what you've learned so far so they can get it back into their brains, and then you add on. If you have alternate riders that are there, but they don't have a spot to ride because the main rider is there as well, you can have the alternate rider meatball or follow on foot. So they find their main rider and they follow them on foot. I find this is nice because if they follow them on horse, that can be difficult because then it might be confusing for your other riders. If there's two riders, they're kind of doubled in terms of like how do I align when there's double riders here. So have your alternate follow on foot if that works for you. And then if you can make space at the end of practice, for example, if any alternates are there, they then get to ride on horseback, and maybe the main rider then reverse meatballs. So the alternate rider gets onto their horse, the main rider parks their horse in the stands and follows their alt on foot. So then the alternate rider also gets a chance to ride the routine on horseback and experience the gait changes and all that. Sometimes too, like some of your members may have like ADHD or other learning disabilities or neurospiciness that makes it difficult for them to concentrate. So the more that you instruct and choreograph, the more that you develop your instructing voice. So it's like, how can you like speak in a way that is interesting and engaging? Uh, do you use the soundboards, for example? It's like maybe one rider is not paying attention, so you make the quack sounds on the soundboard, and you're like, hey, time to pay attention. Like, so like the more that you instruct and choreograph, the more that you'll develop kind of like skills for managing your riders, and helping them understand and memorize and focus on the choreo. But I can understand it can be frustrating for sure if people are not learning at the speed that you would like them to, but sometimes it's because they're tired, they're hungry, they're dehydrated. They can't focus for whatever reason. They're watching TikToks on their phone. Uh, so it's like, how can you help them to be in the right mindset to learn, if that makes sense. Okay, I'll just go down a bit. Sorry, I could talk forever about this stuff. Kappa's asking, do you think it's worth making the little intros people do for the routine? I know they aren't mandatory, but for the aesthetics, I think they're fun. So like for example, with the Hoedown Showdown routine, what we did is after we wrapped up the choreo, so we when we submitted, the take was literally just for the judges. It was this title screen, this American Venom, and then the riders at the end going into global with the gunshots. That's what the judges got. No fancy intro, no fancy outro. We're like, okay, the judges have the take, yay. And then what we did after that is once the deadline was passed, we had submitted our take for the judges. We then went back and filmed some clips with reshade. So here's the intro, just like around Starshine because it's Western themed. And this is also music from the Red Dead soundtrack. Um, So this can be fun for the writers too. It's like a nice like capstone or like finishing out of the routine to record some cute intro and outro clips. And then also for the end here for the credits, one time while we were practicing, Toilet was not writing. She was a god alt, but her main writer was there. So what she did instead is she took some clips of the other members while they were actually performing the routine, and I used this for the credits at the end. Um, so it can be nice. It's kind of like a reward. A reward after you've worked so hard on the routine. You take some cute little reshade clips, and it can be fun for the writers as they're watching the final cut with the intro outro, and they can go, oh, there's me, look, with the reshade, I look so cool, you know. So I like, you don't have to, but if you have the time to do so, it can be nice because it looks more polished and professional, I guess, to have that. Charlie asks, I have one more question. How do you know how long a routine is actually going to be? Um, So what I would say with this is you can prep choreo ahead of time and anticipate that it will be about this length. So for example, say you like map out your big standout sequences or movements and then your transitions in between, and maybe you ride it yourself in the arena, just by yourself or maybe with one other person. You can kind of guess, oh yeah, this section will take about 15 seconds. This section will take about 20 seconds. But what is important to remember is that your plans do not survive contact with the enemy. The enemy in this case is your riders. Something will always come up. Maybe the way that you plan out the choreography, a lot of death happens. Trampling, the alignment doesn't look good, it doesn't match the music, you have to tweak it. Or maybe when you wrote it by yourself in the arena or with one other person, it takes a lot longer or a lot shorter than you thought it would. So I would just say always be ready to adjust, make changes, tweak things as you go. Um, and really, if you can, as soon as like a competitive routine is announced, try to start working right there. So like say for example, oh, uh, SSD is releasing a routine like say May 1st. Can you start getting riders before May 1st? Like the week before, make an announcement in your close server. Hey guys, there's an upcoming SSD routine on May 1st. I don't know how many spots there are going to be, but I can anticipate that probably if we ride in the standard division, we would need at least 6 riders. So I'm gonna look for 6 mains, and then people can sign up as alternates. So it's like, can you get the ball rolling ahead of time so that as soon as you have the theme information, you can start working and thinking of choreo and teaching choreo. Um, and if you do prepare a routine and it's too short at the end, it's better to add on like some more filler or some more fluff at the end that is maybe not visually super interesting, but it's better to meet the time requirement than be short because you get docked a good amount of points for being short on time. Kappa is asking, do you also think it's better to come up with routines as a collective or solo? Um, I think it's always most of the time it's helpful to work as a collective or with a co-choreographer. But say you have a really short timeline for putting the routine together, sometimes then you might want to do most of it by yourself and then get input as needed from your riders or from other staff members or instructors. It kind of depends on how much time you have. Like internationals and classic cup, I think is almost 4 months of time that you have to work on the routine. So there you could maybe work more as a group, but when you have these shorter timelines of 7 to 8 weeks, those sometimes it's better to just do most of it yourself and get input as you need it. Because when you work as a group, it generally does take longer. So you just need to balance that. And then Kamira, I hope I'm saying your name correctly. RRD has used the forum channels to put our writer notes. So alts and your writer for the spot can visualize it as well as easily access it. Yep. Um, you guys are having great comments here. So Charlie is saying, good to make a structure, some kind of plan, listen to all the tips and feedback. So it's not 15 different styles mashed up, but it's still a team project. Yep, that's a good idea. You guys are having great comments here. Um, if you work together, members can quickly help redirect things. For example, if the choreographer gets off track, and then the writers can say something they might like to do that would work well with the theme. Uh, and then if you're working by yourself, you're kind of working on your own time. You don't have to wait for somebody else. It's scheduled to line up with yours. Yeah, so there's just pros and cons to both. Looney is asking, do you like to create the entire routine before you begin practicing, or do you work on the routine bit by bit? Um, so what I generally do is I plan a couple sequences or movements in advance. So like 2 or 3 at a time, because sometimes your riders will learn things super quickly, and you're like, wow, okay, we can keep going. But sometimes too, you get bogged down a little because maybe the alignment is not working out the way you wanted, or the timing is not working out the way you wanted, or the way that you imagined it in your head is not being translated into the arena with your riders. Um, I would say you can choreograph the whole thing ahead of time, but just be ready to change things. So I do like to not do the whole thing ahead of time, or even if I've mapped out my big sequences or movements ahead of time, I know that the transitions in between may change, or the order of the sequences may change. But generally, I do 2 or 3 at a time ahead of time, and then as I work with my riders, I will adjust them as needed. Cam, okay, thank you. So Rosie is asking, how do you balance not overworking your writer students throughout practices or sessions and with the amount of sessions practices in a week? So I would say consider how many practices you have normally when you're not working on a routine. Say you normally have 2. Then while you're working on a routine, you could have 3. And then maybe the final week when you're trying to record, you can have 4. So don't increase too much the requirement because that can lead to burnout. And also too, you can have like a threshold of like who gets the credit for writing a certain spot. So like for example, what we do in Crystal Pirates is if you sign up to be a main writer, you're expected to attend roughly 3/4 of the total amount of practices, so about 70 to 75% if you want to have the main credit at the end of the routine. If you sign up as an alternate, you're expected to attend about 60% of the practices. Um, and then to receive the alternate credit. And then if you sign up but you don't meet the 60%, you get like an honorable mention credit. So you're still acknowledged for what you contributed, but you don't get the full main or alternate writer credit. So then when you're having your writers sign up for spots, you can lay out as a main writer, you will be expected to come to at least 2 out of 3 practices per week. And over the span of this routine, it will be like 30 out of 40 total practices, for example, you should come to. If you're an alternate, you will be expected to attend this many practices per week and a total of so many per total. I can't do the math right now at the end of this whole thing. So then your riders can kind of assess how much time they have over the next 2 or 3 months with work, school, other responsibilities, and they can say, okay, I can commit to being a main rider. I can commit to being an alternate rider, that sort of thing. Charlie is saying, do you choose the main riders and keep them only, or do you have backup riders in case someone decided to drop out? So generally what you do, I'm saying generally, but probably not everybody does it this way. Generally you have main riders, so they have one spot in their routine that is their dedicated spot that they ride all the time. So if you're looking at my commanding notes here, these are my 6 mains for Hoedown Showdown. So they signed up to be main riders and they ride the same spot the entire time. They are the main rider. Then I had 4 alternates, I think. I can't quite remember. And what they would do is Pablo, for example, was the designated alt for Jenny. So whenever Jenny was not there, Pablo would ride Jenny's spot. And if Jenny was there, Pablo would follow Jenny on foot. Pablo would meatball. But Pablo sometimes too could be called as a backup alt for Hayden, because Hayden's spot was sometimes a mirror for Jenny's, so they were similar enough that Pablo could reliably just hop into Hayden's spot, read Hayden's notes, and do a pretty good job of riding Hayden's spot if needed. I had 2 god alts. Mishi and Toilet were both god alts. God alts means that they will ride any spot. So if at any moment any of my main riders were unavailable, I could ask Toilet or Mishi to go and read their notes, and then they would hop in and ride that person's spot. And what they would also do is at every practice, they would choose a different rider to meatball with, so to follow on foot and get a feel for what their spot looked like. Um, I don't teach the backup or alternate riders separately to the main riders. They all work together. So the main riders ride on horseback. The alternate riders follow on foot, like their horses in the stands and they're running on their little leggies. And the alternate riders are also encouraged to take notes, um, even if they're meatballing, if they're running on foot. Because sometimes you think about the choreography in a different way from the main rider. And then Cam has some good advice here for handling like people getting tired. Take as many breaks as you can. Um, you could also do a few days a week where the practice is optional and then you do fun games or it's a day off. Roblox, Meadow, Rival Stars. Yeah, those are some great tips. Generally, like I would say, if you're first starting choreo, don't go more than an hour for routine practices because like your brain is working really hard when you're learning choreography. It's very different from regular dressage practices. Um, and then like give them some time to talk at the beginning, and then maybe take a little 5 minute break in the middle. And then if you do need to go longer than an hour, maybe towards the end when you're trying to get takes, like say maybe you're going for an hour and a half or 2 hours, try to give a 10-15 minute break per hour that you're working. So they can go to the bathroom, they can grab a snack, grab some water, hug their cat, do a little dance. Yeah. Because also too, like the more that you are leading practice, the more that you get tired. You have to keep that in mind as well. Um, Pi is asking, what would you do if a main writer suddenly left the club like a week before recording without anything prior? So this is where having good commanding notes and good writer notes comes in clutch. Because that just happens sometimes. Like I had that happen with a routine I choreographed last year and a half ago. It was like for a smaller dressage server, the dressage house, and one of my main writers did that. They just left, I think, 2 or 3 weeks before we were supposed to submit the routine. But luckily, I had good commanding notes and we had good writer notes. So one of the alternates that was there like reliably, like they were coming to practice every week, they were able to step in and fill that spot as a main writer. And sometimes people just do that, they just leave and there's not really anything you can do. So it's like how can you like get an alternate writer up to speed and kind of like promote them to be a main writer? Worst case scenario, you ride the spot and call the commands at the same time, which is not fun, but sometimes that's what you got to do. So, yeah, it's like, can you have some stop gaps or some fail safes in place in case that happens. And a big part of that is good commanding notes and good rider notes. Yeah, and Chem is also having some good tips here for giving people breaks. And also too, like when you first start doing routine practices, try not to make them too much longer than your regular practices because they're used maybe to focusing for an hour for regular practice. So maybe start your comp practices out at that same length, an hour. And then if you do need to make them longer, just increase in small increments, like 15 minutes here, an hour 15, and then maybe 2 weeks later we do an hour 30. But you'll see too that the more time that you require them to focus, generally the worse their output. Because it's hard. It's hard work to focus on choreo. So you have to keep that in mind too. Like, is their attention going to decrease over time? So what's the sweet spot for the length of practice? Pi is asking, but if you ride and call the ghost, who is filming then? That's a good point. So you can have an alt. If you have an alt account, you can throw the alt into film. Maybe you have a friend from another club or team who is not riding in the routine and they come and film for you. Like you add them to the club temporarily so they can film. Um, or maybe you have someone in your club or team who is not riding in the routine at all and they film for you. Or you could like quickly teach somebody else to do the commanding and they command while you ride, or you quickly bring in someone and teach them. They have not written the routine yet at all. You're just like, hey, Hail Mary, can you learn this spot in 2 hours and you're gonna ride during the final takes? Sometimes you have some people like that who can do it. Just kind of go with what you can get. Rosie's asking, is it rare for people to leave in the middle of learning routines? Um, I think it's not a question of them leaving because of the routine. It's just a question of them leaving the club for the normal reasons. Um, their life got too busy. Maybe they lost interest in SSO. Um, I had one routine that I taught previously. One of the riders just really didn't like the way that I command, and that was one of the reasons why they left. So, I mean, your club or team may not is not going to be the right fit for everyone, and even yourself as a dressage instructor or choreographer or commander, you are not the right fit for everyone as well. So some people may leave for that reason, and it just happens. So yeah, I say it happens at the same rate as people just leave the club normally, and sometimes it's in the middle of a routine. You just have to pivot and account for that. Yeah. More routine focused clinics, Rosie? Um, maybe there are a lot of work to put together, and I would like to leave space open for other SSD instructors to host routine-based clinics, and then also the registered clubs and teams in SSD sometimes do routine-based clinics as well. So what I would say is if you go into here, I'll send the link in the chat. If you go into Topic Talk here, like maybe I would do another one like 2 or 3 months from now, so I'm not like hogging this topic, if that makes sense. If you go into Topic Talk and request what you would like to specifically see around routines. Maybe it's um, how do I teach to riders who have trouble memorizing? How do I make diagrams? How do I work on transitions? How do I teach complicated stuff like pinwheels? If you go and request it in that channel, the SSD instructors see it, and then maybe it can inspire them to make a clinic. Okay, Ren, thank you for coming. No worries if it's late. Like you guys can go. You don't need to stay. If you, I know time zones for some of y'all, it's like really late at night or like in the AM if you're like in Australia or New Zealand or whatever. You guys do not have to stay. Yes, have a lovely, lovely rest of your day, whether it's Saturday still for you or maybe it's Sunday because of time zones. The magic of time zones. Thank you for coming. Well, I'm glad it was helpful. Wonderful. We love to see it. Yeah, and like the best thing you can do when you first start choreographing is just to do your first routine, and that kind of gets you over the hump of it being scary, and then you just go from there. Rosie asks, how do you encourage riders without consequences for not coming to routine practices or for just not being focused and you have done everything you can to help them? That is a difficult balance. to find. Um, One of the things, like I mentioned earlier, is you can have like thresholds to receive the main writer credit, so they need to attend X amount of practices. The same for your alternates, and if they do not meet the requirements to be credited as a main or an alt, they get an honorable mention. That can be motivating for some people because they do really want that main writer or that alternate writer credit. Um, Another thing too is that you can be upfront with them. You can say like, hey, like I'm going to prioritize main spots for people who come consistently to practice and who are focused during practice, who listen well, or maybe you've already choreographed some routines and you know like, hey, I know these people are reliable. They focus, they take good notes, they're good teammates, they're encouraging to the other riders. I'm going to prioritize them as mains. But then you also want to think about if you have some new people who came in, you also want to give them a chance as the main rider. So maybe say you have a new member who just joined, they sign up as a main, you give them a chance, but then maybe their alternate is a rider that you know is reliable and can step in as needed. Um, there's only so much you can do to motivate people because SSO dressage is basically you're volunteering to do this with everyone. We're not being paid, you know, we're doing this together for fun. So you can only motivate them so much. And if they don't show up, it's like maybe you can have a frank conversation with them over DMs or in a voice call. Sometimes what helps is like emphasizing the teamwork aspect. Like I can do this as a choreographer in terms of providing diagrams and explaining the content in different ways, but you also need to put in the time as somebody who's writing the routine in terms of learning, taking good notes, getting caught up if you miss practice, like getting in touch with your alternate writer if they wrote for you. Um, you know, it's like a teamwork. And then just respecting each other's time as well. If someone has like a neurospiciness, like they're hyperactive, they have ADHD, they're dyslexic, or they have auditory processing problems, uh, I would say like ask them what is helpful for them. So maybe like in school they had like some learning accommodations that you can maybe translate into teaching them the choreography. Like maybe they find it really helpful if they have a video to follow. So like say you have one writer that they don't learn well from diagrams or having the stuff explained to them verbally. So ahead of the practice, you'll go in the arena and you'll take a video of yourself doing that section so they can watch it ahead of time. Sometimes too, if you have a co-choreographer or a sub-commander, if one person needs more attention, that rider can go with your sub commander in another call and they just work the two of them together alone because they just need more attention from the instructor. Yeah, if you guys have questions, you can send them to me in DMs, that's fine. Francie is asking, is it useful to let the riders see how you choreograph before letting them choreograph a part or a whole routine? What I would recommend is depending on how much time you have, say you have a member who wants to become a choreographer or they're interested in instructing, generally you would work with them on their first routine. So what we do in Crystal Pirates is our baby instructors are paired with a senior instructor as they learn how to teach the beginner content of our curriculum. And the end of that beginner section of the curriculum is a test that the riders need to pass, and then a showcase routine. So the senior instructor will work with a baby instructor through the lessons of the Explorer section, how to prep for the test, how to host the test, score the test, and then they work together to prepare a showcase routine that is 2 to 3 minutes long. So that entire time, the baby instructor has the senior instructor as a mentor to kind of teach them the ropes. Um, but say you have a member who is, you know, they're super passionate about dressage, they learn quickly, they will go and learn on their own without you giving them material. Like, for example, you know that they attend a lot of open lessons in community servers, like here in SSD, or when other clubs or teams host open lessons, they go to that because they're just so interested about dressage. They will go and find dictionaries from other clubs or teams that they read on their own free time. They will come to you with ideas of like, hey, for our current routine or our next routine, could we maybe do this? And maybe you see that this person is super locked in and you know they're passionate, what you can do is, for example, in Crystal Pirates, the big like all rank or all club routines that we do, generally it's myself or Toilet who choreograph those. But then there's all these little competition servers that we talked about a bit earlier, TDN, Dressage House, Foundation of Stars and Dreamers, the Dressage University, our Dressage. There's like a bunch of smaller ones. You can offer to your little budding choreographer or like really passionate member, hey, would you be interested in choreographing a mini routine with 3 to 4 riders for this smaller competition server? And then you just give them full free reign. Like either they create their own server separately for that and they bring some of your members in if they want to participate, or maybe you create a little category for them in the closed server and they organize themselves there. But you can kind of see how do they proceed with the responsibility of being in charge of routine. And then from there, you can kind of go, okay, I could potentially, we could work together for our next big routine. And I can see how they choreograph and how they command and how they organize themselves, for example. There are some clubs and teams that pay instructors. That's interesting. I have not heard of that. So Rosie is asking, speaking of tests, can teaching writers routines be considered tests to see how well writers are understanding what you give them? Yeah. So I feel like routines, like if you think about like standard dressage or like normal dressage that you do in practices, a lot of it is like line work, especially with your beginners, and then you move into more complicated stuff like circles and mirror shapes and slants. But routines are often combining aspects of dressage in a non-standard or unique way that you would not necessarily encounter during a regular practice. Um, so it can be a good test of their understanding of the material, but also a good test of your ability to convey what you want them to do and how you want them to perform the choreography. So often when you're teaching routines, you have to be very specific. So as your front hooves are over this arena line, this happens. When you are doing revolves, you are looking for this horse marker. On this go, you turn this far because of slant math. In the circle, you're looking for this alignment to this rider. So it's kind of like a test of both ways. How well your riders understand the material that you've taught them up until now and how it's being applied in the routine, and also how good of a job have you done at communicating the material. The competition servers, yeah, I can send a list afterwards. I'll make a little mini list for you guys when I send the ping for the recording, and you guys can check it out if you're interested, because that can be nice too. Sometimes with like SSD can be a bit scary sometimes because it's the biggest one, and it can be nice sometimes to compete with a smaller server. All right, do we have any additional questions? Poor Vanu, I'm gonna send this recording and be like, why did you talk for so long? 2 hours? Uh, but you guys had really excellent comments and questions. I appreciate it. 2 hours of dressage stuff. Yeah, dressage philosophy. We love to see it. We love to hear it. You can really get into the weeds for sure. It never ends. Yes, go torture your comp team, Kappa, in the best way, of course. In the best way. What I always say to the pirates is, can you feel your neurons firing? Your neural pathways are formed. Isn't this fantastic? And they just kind of go, oh my goodness, Felix, stop. But it's good. When your brain hurts, you know that you're learning, you know? It's like going to the gym and your muscles hurt because you just lifted a bunch of heavy weights. It's the same for dressage. When you do a lot of complicated, like choreography or like new concepts, tests are good. Um, in the way that it kind of like allows you to see if the writers really understand the material that you've taught. Because when you're doing practices, they're listening to you explain the move. Maybe sometimes you have diagrams for it. Maybe sometimes you do demonstrations. But through the use of a dressage test, they can really demonstrate their knowledge. Um, and you can kind of assess, do I need to reteach this section? Or does this writer in particular maybe really struggle with extended can or comb alignment, for example, and I can spend more time working on that with them. So in Crystal Pirates, we teach on a curriculum. So all writers join the club. They start with our beginner material. They learn that, they take a beginner test. Then they move into intermediate. They learn that, intermediate test, etc. And then each test tests the core concepts of that part of the curriculum and allows us to assess, are they ready to move on to the next section? If not, we review, we retest. Um, because each part of dressage builds on the next. So for example, you learn comb alignment as a beginner. Comb alignment then becomes circle alignment as an intermediate rider, and slant alignment then as an advanced rider. And then from advanced you get into elite, or elite material is just weird, like experimental stuff that often ends up in routines. So I would say tests are helpful, but just be prepared to do a lot of prep leading up to it so that they're comfortable and they feel ready and they're not scared. I mean, some of them are still scared, but try to get them like feeling confident before they take their test. And then when they take their test, what we generally do is we record it and then we score it in a scorecard that kind of looks like the one you get from the SSD judges. We score their test based on like how well did they execute certain concepts and moves. And then we give them like feedback of how they can improve what they did really well. And then usually they have to take the test 2 or 3 times before they pass. But then it allows us to review the material that they really struggled on that maybe we didn't necessarily notice that they needed more help with during regular practices. And then we know they have a strong foundation before they move up to the next rank, the next part of the curriculum. It's more work for you as an instructor, but I think it helps you really understand what your riders need help with. It's another way to help you understand what they need help with through testing. Trying to make instructors feel seen. What do you mean by that? Like you're trying to make instructors in your club feel seen? Like appreciated? Okay. Um, feel seen for their work. Okay, yeah, that can be hard. Uh, I think a lot of it is acknowledging their contributions and including them. So, for example, with Crystal Pirates, we have a staff server called the quarter deck, and in the quarter deck, we have a section for the instructors. So the leaders and the owners see that section, all the instructors see that section. And anytime we're discussing something dressage related to the club, we put it in there. So we don't keep it in the owner and leaders only category. But anytime anything dressage related is being discussed, we put it in the instructor section. So they're always included in the conversation whenever it's related to dressage. Um, what we also do for Crystal Pirates is we have a progression system for our instructors. So they start out as a junior instructor or a baby instructor. Once they lead a trial batch through the beginner content, their test, and their showcase, they rank up to be like an instructor, like a regular instructor. Then they lead a group through the intermediate content, the test, the advanced content, the test. Once they've done all that, they become a senior instructor. Once they're a senior instructor, they are then eligible to lead a big all rank routine, like one for SSD, um, on their own without another senior instructor or the leader, the owner, being there with them as a co-choreographer. So they have like a progression that they can work towards too. And we do acknowledge them like every time that they rank up, we go like, hey, good job. Like for example, thinking of a random name, AirPods. AirPods just ranked up from junior instructor to full instructor. Go congratulate them in the chat. Or AirPods just finished leading the showcase for our last trial batch. Wow, they did so good, and you can kind of highlight their areas of growth, what they did really well, um, kind of give them their flowers. Uh, yeah, and also too, like the more that you work with new instructors, the more you can kind of see how each of their unique personalities are and what kind of feedback that they need and acknowledgments that they need, if that makes sense. Like some baby instructors really appreciate verbal feedback, like over call. Some of them really like written feedback. Some of them like to be acknowledged publicly. You can kind of see as you go what kind of feedback they like from you. And another thing we do with our baby instructors is we do a pre-brief when they're learning before each lesson, which is we kind of go over what do you plan to teach today? What are your goals for the day? And then after we do a debrief where we go, this is how the lesson went. What do you think you did well? What do you think you can improve on for next time? Charlie asked, do you ever have any issues with writers whose first language isn't English? Um, how would you work with them? Any tips for understanding their part? Do you prefer people in comp team to have a good understanding of English from the beginning? That is a good question. In Crystal Pirates, we have one member who is French speaking, but I can also speak French. So that makes it easy. But if you have people who speak a language other than English and you don't speak their language, I would say for myself, I have the tendency to talk fast. So I try to make an effort to talk slower. And I just tell them, hey, if I'm yapping a mile a minute, just tell me to slow down. What you can also do is try to type out their section of the routine, because sometimes if you're learning a language or it's your second language, seeing written information is easier than hearing it, especially with differences in accents. Like, say, for example, if you speak German, but your English teacher in school had a British accent, that can be quite different from the Canadian or an American accent in English. So it can be hard for them to listen to you because they're used to a British accent, for example. So if you can type out the instructions for them, then they could also potentially translate it with Google Translate into their native language. That could be helpful. Or think about diagrams, visual aids, or you demonstrate their part of the routine for them, or you write it and record a video. Like, what are other ways that you can convey the information that is not verbally that can help them out? Also, too, like we've had members of Chris Press in the past who aren't native English speakers, and they kind of just get used to your accent and the way that you convey information in English. They'll have more of a learning curve than someone who also speaks English as their first language, but it's not an unsurmountable obstacle. If they really have the drive to learn and be a part of your club or team, and you make the effort to accommodate the fact that English is not their first language, you can definitely find like a way to work around it, if that makes sense. Through diagrams, typing it out for them, recording videos. Yep, yep, it's possible. All right. Do we have any other questions? I'll do another little dance in front of my desk. You just go for it, Rosie. Like the biggest obstacle, like if you think of any other creative hobby you've done in the past, whether it's painting, drawing, playing the guitar, um, skateboarding, you know, the biggest obstacle is just getting started. So your first routine will likely not be good. Like I think back to the first routine I ever choreographed, it was not terrible, but it's definitely not the caliber of the routines I choreograph now. Um, so you just need to get started, jump into the deep end. Maybe you don't have to jump in. You can jump into the shallow end, but jump into the water and get started because, like any other creative thing that you do, you improve over time as you do it. And the only way to improve is to do the thing. Uh, and also, the more that you work on routines, the more that you develop your dressage brain, the more that you start to see dressage and choreography in like every aspect of your daily life, or when you watch movies, TV shows, you play video games, you read books, you're talking to other people, you'll get inspiration that way. Dedicate someone to recording in the server? You mean for your routines? I don't think so. I think most of the time the commander will record. Um, But say, for example, last minute you have to step in and write a spot because somebody left and you don't have any alternates to fill that spot. It might be nice to have a backup recorder, like someone you know that you can DM and last minute they can just pop into the arena and record for you. Might be nice to have that person available. But I wouldn't say like someone is a designated recorder because maybe they also want to write routines. I don't know. Sometimes too, usually like if you're commanding, one of the other staff members is not always writing, so they can record for you. Yeah. But I don't know if a designated recorder is required. If that makes sense. Yeah, because generally, like your staff members won't always write in the routine because they have other responsibilities. Like maybe they're teaching as you're teaching the routine, they're teaching the regular lessons. Like they're taking that part of the workload. So they don't have the bandwidth to also write a spot. But then they can just pop in and record because that doesn't require a lot of work. All right, I need to head out and do some things. But I appreciate all your lovely questions and comments. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday or Sunday if it's already Sunday for you. I will edit the recording and upload it, and I will ping y'all when it's ready. Yay! Yes, enjoy the rest of your day or night or morning or afternoon, whatever time zone you're in. Have a good one. Alrighty. Bye.